Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Okay, friends, so last few days we've been talking primarily about, the practice of meditation and about the mind and how the mind has got all entangled in the inner tangle and the outer tangle, and causing so many problems in the world. And even though people say they want to live in peace and harmony, the way they live and think and speak and act, it's cause all the chaos and confusion that we find in the world, not only today, of course. It's been going on since as far back as I can remember. And so, a lot of people hear about meditation, they say, let's just learn meditation, learn how to control our mind and how to overcome our neuroses or manage our anger or things like that. But it goes a lot, beyond that. So I want to, in this talk, kind of go back in time and see how this thing all started. Now, you have to kind of try to follow along and use your imagination a little bit. We're going to go back and talk about evolution. So, most people agree with sort of Darwin's theory of evolution, rather than that some creator being created the world and all the people in 7 days and just put them on the earth, and all of a sudden that was the thing. But so, following that Darwin's theory of evolution, say the first being was a little amoeba or something in the ocean. And then that amoeba starts, reproducing. And then those, over time, they mutate and other little ocean creatures evolve. And that keeps on going on for many millions of years. They're going from small little creatures to bigger types of fish, and eventually all the way up to whales and billions of trillions in the ocean. And the ocean started to get a little bit crowded. So then some turtle or some fish or one of those happens to pop their head out of the water and look, wow, look at the land out there. So, maybe it's less crowded out there. Didn't see anything running around. So they evolved ways to, breathe on land and grow legs, like a tadpole, and crawl up on the land. And then the same thing happened on the land. They started going around to eat everything on the land. And then food is getting scarce. Somebody looked up the trees and, oh, there's food up there. And so evolution went to, they grew claws and maybe wings and be able to climb up on the trees or fly up on the trees to get food. And then gradually, all the different land type of creatures evolved from small animals to bigger ones. Animals that grow long necks so they could, reach up and get the food. So it was adaptation, the adaptation of the species and survival of the fittest, and the animals, evolving to have protective mechanisms, like porcupines, could throw their spikes at some animal, or skunks let out a horrible smell and scare them away, and all that. So the whole evolution, grew like that until finally, these human beings arose or evolved out of the same thing. Their minds evolved to sort of figure out how they're going to produce more food. And so they learn how to use tools and start growing food, use their intelligence, their brain then, because of this desire to live and multiply, the brain evolved to invent things. And so the population grew and grew. And so basically that evolution continued up to the present day. And so far this evolution basically has been a kind of what they call a group evolution, or a lower evolution. And that means that the whole groups of different animals or, evolved kind of like together. So all the animals of a certain species, have basic same kind of habits. Dogs do what dogs do, cats do what cats do, and then even human beings then, in different places where they were, started, the cultures evolved, and of course they spread all over the whole earth. And then even in the more modern days, it's the same thing. Wars are fought over water, over land rights, in order to protect their species, or to, protect, make sure they're going to have a means to live. And then they fight and kill over, these type of things. And basically those habits are passed off from the children are born, they learn, they get programmed by the parents, the society, and then they grow up, and it keeps on repeating itself over and over again. So that's called, kind of group evolution. And mostly it was one of physical evolution, but also mental evolution, because the mind has evolved too, as we've already mentioned, from the animal type of mind to the human type of mind. But it was propelled or kept going because of this desire for survival, and the desire for to live more and more comfort and happiness. So, and that has continued up to the present day. And even though a lot of people are not satisfied, and there's so much suffering in the world, the things kind of just keep on going in the same way. People are trying to do things and search for happiness, and they're beating their head against the wall in order to find happiness, and because of the suffering, they turn to drugs or other types of pleasure seeking and harming others. And again, this has just been like going around in circles without much really thinking involved, just following others. And that the people in the society, very few of them can get beyond that, the sort of the group think or the group conditioning. Except once in a while, a certain person comes along and starts to question that. Question just the following and copying what other people are doing, and feels that there should be a new way, or they break out of that group conditioning, and they start to think like an individual, and even to the point of going against the grain of normal thinking. So they would, then be cast or looked upon by normal rest of society as being kind of like an outcast. But anyway, they persevere and keep going. But they have to sort of walk alone. And that inquiry, those few individuals over the course of millions of years, or at least thousands of years, they've come and gone, and all the different religions of the world, of course, have come up and grew out of that. But even those people were also persecuted, like Jesus Christ, right, hung up on a cross for trying to, make changes to the world. But so that somebody like the Buddha comes along and also questions that norm. But the Buddha had to break away from the group. Look, here was a guy who was, born as a prince, could have inherited, the throne and all that power, but yet he persevered and, questioned that and struck out on his own. And people, then regarded him as like an outcast. And even then he went on his search for enlightenment and went to the various ascetic, yogic teachers of the day and was following their methods of meditation and their ideas of how to liberate the mind from the flesh, or to attain whatever they imagine, some kind of liberation. And as I already mentioned, the Buddha went to these teachers and tried what they had to offer, but then felt that really wasn't the way. So even he left them, and even they ostracized him. You're probably all familiar with the story of the Buddha was practicing with 5 other sort of ascetics, and they were practicing starving the body and sleeping out on nails and torturing the body, practicing these self-mortifications, thinking that was the way to liberate the mind from the samsara, or liberate the soul from the flesh, and there are various ideas about that. And the Buddha practiced all those things and almost died from starvation. He got so weak, but then he started to eat food again. And those people say, "Oh, look at this ascetic Gautama. He's backsliding now. He's getting soft." But the Buddha realized that's not that way of practice. He almost died from it. So what's the use of that? So even he left them. And it took a lot of courage. He left that group and wandered as a solitary person. And then finally, you all know the story, sat down and determined he wasn't going to leave that seat under the Bodhi tree until he realized, what he felt was a true liberation. So anyway, in that story, that the Buddha had to have a great courage, to break away from the group. And he became an independent thinker, became a true individual. But he was ostracized by that. And even after the Buddha attained enlightenment, he thought, who could I teach this Dhamma to? And he thought, well, those five guys I was meditating with, they probably could understand, So he went back and found these 5 ascetics, at the deer park, and they saw him coming from a distance, and they said, oh, here comes a slacker, Gautama, and wearing nice robes and nice and fat, and so he wasn't fat, and they didn't at first want to have anything to do with him, They didn't want to get up and offer him a seat to go greet him, But as he got closer, they noticed, oh, there's something different about this guy, And then, anyway, I'm not going to go into the whole story, but so he went and taught them the Dhamma. So that, in order to do that the Buddha had to break away from the group. In order to evolve higher, then a person needs to, in most cases, break away from the group. And that's really the beginning of what you call individual evolution or higher evolution. Rather than the lower evolution, the group evolution, which is basically cyclic, just going around in circles. So parents have children, they grow up, then they die and they produce more children, but the habits and then so on just keep on revolving, the cyclic nature, and suffering continuing to prolong and recycle itself. So this is the beginning of what you could call the spiritual path. You have to take evolution into your own hands. And so if you feel that something needs to be changed, you have to have that courage or fearlessness and courage to break away from the group. But that's very fearful for a lot of people because you get ostracized from that. And so that's why it takes a lot of inner strength and courage to embark on the spiritual path. So we come now to the modern day where, since it started, back with the time of the hippies, in California in the 60s. They also got tired of the establishment think, So they wanted to, why do boys always have to have a short little crew cut hair? Why can't we grow our hair long? And they grew their hair long. And, they didn't want to, were fed up with the way government was wrong or certain religions, and they started to, dabble in, drugs and things. We all know that story. So anyway, so they were also ostracized, right? And persecuted for trying to change. So, it started with that kind of inquiry about, wanting to change the way people think, instead of all the kids having to conform to the so-called American dream, right? Grow up, get married, or live in a white picket fence house, and have 2 or 3 kids, and so on. I'm not criticizing that, but I'm just saying that was, kids were programmed to do that, and parents wanted their kids to take over the family business or try to get them to, follow what they felt was right. But, so many kids rebelled. And so anyway, people were looking for a path. They wanted to change, but, they needed to find some way that's going to really provide real change. And so just about that time when this great inquiry was happening, with America's youth, the sages from India, yogis from India, Vivekananda and Paramahamsa Yogananda and Zen masters and these spiritual teachers from the East started to come to America, with the advent of the airplane and so on. And they started talking about liberation. What liberation? What the heck is that? Never heard of that before. It sounded interesting. And expand your mind. And of course, they were taking drugs, LSD, other psychedelics, and they started to experience these altered states of consciousness that no one had ever seen before. And it kind of jived or coincided with the explanation of these states of liberation and so on that these yogis and Zen masters were talking about. And so, that started the great, sort of Dhamma revolution, or the interest in Dhamma. So many of those people, including myself, went to India back in the 70s, to try to find Dhamma, although that wasn't my initial reason for going to India. But anyways, people like Ram Dass and so many others, it was part of that same kind of evolution, wanting to evolve higher out of the group thing. And so, that's the beginning of the, what you call the spiritual path. But at that time, because there were so many different teachers coming, and they were preaching different things, right? Even though there's spiritual paths, there was different goals of the spiritual path, being reborn with Brahma, or, liberation from samsara, or, different sort of religious viewpoints. And, teaching different things, and, some saying, well, you have to be a vegetarian in order to be able to, to meditate. And others say, hey, you have to follow 5 precepts. And others say you have to be celibate, you have to give up sex, you have to give up alcohol, you have to give up all these things. And, they're hearing different things from different people. Some said, oh, yeah, you can be a monk, you can't be married. And others said, no, you can be married, it's okay. So many different things, they were hearing about. And so people started to dabble in different, spiritual things that they were hearing about. And, the yogis and monks and others would, come by in their yearly tours and give lectures. And somebody say, hey, come on, let's go listen to this monk or this other person. And they, hear a talk. And like with transcendental meditation. That's how actually I got started. When I got out of the army in 1971. That's the TM, Transcendental Meditation, was at its height of popularity, or really coming on strong then. And, I saw a poster up at the City College in Riverside about Transcendental Meditation. Whoa, Transcendental Meditation, well, what's that? I'd never heard of meditation before. Or Buddhism, or even yoga. But it interested me, and then I took a course in world religion. But anyway, I learned the TM technique. And, they said you had to give up drugs for a while in order to, practice the meditation. So I did for a while. And I practiced the meditation, and I experienced, something, it's just a low level of concentration, and some quasi-altered states of consciousness. But I knew there was something to that, but at the time, I had just been in the army for 3 years, and it was like being in a prison, and I was in Vietnam also. So I got out. I want to have fun. I want to have fun and games, right? I wanted to catch up with all the hippies, grow my hair long, and take drugs and all this stuff. So I, didn't faithfully follow that. That TM at the time, but I knew that there was something to the meditation. But I'll burn off this desire to, be a hippie and all this stuff, and perhaps get back to it later. And that's, what happened. Anyway, I'm not going to bore you with all that whole story, but you can read all about it in my autobiography. But so anyway, this, there's so many people now, the young people like in America and Europe, they became Hare Krishnas, or they became yogis and followers of these different things. And, they were also ostracized. And there was a big thing about brainwashing back in those days too, the Munis and the Hare Krishnas, and the ordinary people thought they were brainwashed, and they were trying to capture these kids and deprogram them and all kind of stuff, because they couldn't understand why these kids are doing these strange things, dancing on the street and giving flowers out and all things like that, becoming vegetarian. But anyway, so people started practicing different things. And maybe they practiced being a vegetarian for a while, then they, for some reason, they stopped that. Maybe they decided to be celibate for a while, and they practiced that for a while, and then they gave that up. They tried fasting, or they tried meditating, different types of meditation, maybe chanting mantras. Then if they didn't get quick success with that, or deep meditation, they say, that don't work. And they go try something else, watching the breath, anapanasati. And so people were kind of going around, sampling all these different spiritual traditions. But they were, because at that time in this country, everything was changing so fast, right? People wanted things faster, 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 faster. And the idea that you could just, get things fast, so people thought they would try some of these spiritual techniques or things, and they would, get quick results. But for some, they didn't get quick enough results, so they wanted to change and try something else, or they would go like a smorgasbord, shopping around, and not sticking with any one thing long enough, probably, to really get go deep in that particular teaching. So this idea of trying different things, it may be okay, but it's like if you try to find water, and somebody says, "Oh, there's water there. Well, go dig there." So you dig down, a couple feet, but you don't hit any water, and you're getting kind of tired. And there's no water here. So, you go a mile over somewhere else, and you try digging there, and the same thing. You dig a couple feet, you get tired. You say, "There's no water here." And you keep on digging all these shallow holes, not reaching any water. So the same way with a lot of people on this, trying to dabble in different techniques and different methods, but changing it. Then a lot of them burned out and gave up all that altogether and went back to hedonism or something else. Sell used cars or something. So anyway, so but they were kind of sincere, they were sincere, but they were just picking and choosing whatever sort of tickled their fancy at the time, but then, it didn't, produce those quick effects. So, what has to happen, that is called like the path of irregular steps. It's kind of irregular because you try something for a while and you decide to change it, and you try something else for a while and try to change it, and dabbling too much, and then you wind up getting confused. So what has to happen is a transition has to be made from that kind of haphazard practice to one that has a clear and definite and clear kind of methodology to it, where the practice is sort of regular, where the practice is more systematic, and also that it's founded on the right view. Now, a lot of those people who first started pursuing spiritual paths, they just heard about these things. Maybe they heard just part of a lecture and somebody mentioned something and they just took that and meditate. Yeah, 30 minutes a day. That's all you got to do is meditate. 30 minutes a day and you might be able to levitate. So people were, trying those things, but failed to see the kind of the big picture behind it. You see, and didn't have any real foundation. And they didn't want to, follow a particular guru or really to commit themselves. They just wanted to be free and kind of do whatever they want, but they wanted to do it with a spiritual kind of disguise to it. And so they, wound up, giving it up at some point, or anyway, not going that far in it. So, so when it comes to this, now when it comes to the Dhamma, transitioning to, let's say when you come to the Dhamma, the teachings of the Buddha, there, the Noble Eightfold Path, that is what we call the path of regular steps. Because the first part of that is gaining right view, understanding. The Buddha wanted us to really understand what we're doing, why we're doing it, and start at the very beginning. And and then some people who've been, when you come to the Dhamma, people might say, well, I've already been practicing this and practicing that, but it's like, no, you have to go back to the spiritual ABCs and actually make a commitment. Like before, most of the people didn't want to make commitments. Like I had a friend when we went to get initiated in a transcendental meditation, they made you bring some flowers and to the teacher of the transcendental meditation and so I didn't have any qualms with that. I got some flowers, but my friend said, "I'm not going to bring no flowers." he didn't want to think like he was going to make some big commitment, to doing that. So he didn't want to. He didn't go. But anyway, so, to take refuge. So, we have to go back to our spiritual ABCs and forget what you may have learned before and make a commitment to want to practice the Dhamma. And that's going for refuge, like to the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, like we recite in the evening. So that foundation of the spiritual path is, to really make a commitment that if you want to do something. Because when you really make a commitment like that, and then it sinks down deeper, into the heart, and to know that this is not a sort of a quick fix, in practicing the Dhamma. So a person takes refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and as I explained in the first night when the retreat started, is different, the two levels of what it means by with the Buddha, Dhamma, and the Sangha. So the taking refuge in the Buddha doesn't mean you got to sign your soul away and sort of following one particular person, like some other religions. If you don't believe in this person, they're going to save you. Then, but it's more or less the principle of what the Buddha is, the nature of our own mind. Deep within our own mind, we have that pure essence of awareness and the pure consciousness and awareness that is happy and full of happiness in its own nature, and totally fulfilling, to live more in the present moment. So when you're practicing mindfulness, for example, when you're just taking each step, lifting, swinging, lowering, at that time you're taking refuge in awareness. You're taking refuge in the present moment so that the mind is not getting drawn out by other unnecessary things and creating thoughts. So by developing concentration as a way to keep your mind from, keep going back and forth to the past and the future and all of the negative conditioning that's come with that. So that is like taking refuge in the Buddha. Because that practice of mindfulness, being in the present moment, is one of the main attributes of the awareness. So that is what taking refuge on a deeper level means. Knowing that power is within oneself, and follow that. So anyway, and then to develop right view. So we've been talking about the right view, and the right view, according to the Dhamma, is the Four Noble Truths. It means learning the nature of suffering, the cause of suffering, that suffering can be overcome, and the path leading to the cessation of suffering, the Noble Eightfold Path. And because that's the view that leads to the state of ultimate happiness, or leads back into oneself. So anyway, and of course the right view means understanding the law of karma and about understanding about impermanence. We've already been discussing to a certain extent. It's sort of the roadmap of how to reconnect with the intrinsic nature and pure Dhamma, with the nature awareness that's at the base of our mind. And all the things that are connected with that. So the right view is like a roadmap. How many of you followed, when you were driving, you used to have maps before all this GPS stuff? You'd go to AAA and get a road map, Route 66, or, Washington to California. You just want to drive there, and you get out your map and you plan the route. So it's good to have a map, right? How many people thought they didn't need a map and they wind up getting lost? So there's some people that want to follow a spiritual path. I don't need to follow anybody else. It's all right there in me. I'll find it. So it's like a person who says, okay, I want to drive from here to, Florida. So they jump in their car with a 6-pack of beer and their joint, and they're going down the road and getting loaded, and then they miss the turnoff in Florida, and they wind up, in Kansas or somewhere, and they're stuck in a tornado because they thought they didn't need a map. So the same way, people that undertake the spiritual practices can get quite sidetracked like that if they don't have a clear roadmap. So the Buddha was a map maker. Now, if you want to follow a map, you want a person who's actually been to those places, right? Who knows the potholes and knows the shortcuts or knows the difficult areas. So we should choose some person who's been there, done that. So the Buddha is somebody like, a map maker. And that map is the Eightfold Path with all of the 37 requisites of enlightenment. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, and the 7 enlightenment factors. And then the methods of training, like especially for the training to be a monastic, so very specific types of trainings for that. Or even as lay people training and living, by the 5 precepts and so on, following right livelihood and these various types of trainings that are all designed to help guide the mind in the smoothest possible way to reach the goal of happiness, the goal of at least freedom from suffering. Now you may not be happy, but at least not suffering. So I've been a monk for almost 50 years, and people will say, they're imagining a monk. They have to be celibate. They can't eat any time they want to. They can't go to the movies and all these things. They think it must be horrible. So they say, "Are you happy?" And they're expecting me. The average idea of happiness is kind of with a big stomach going up and down. Excuse me. So I tell them I'm not unhappy, because happiness means things and looks different to different people. But I tell them I'm not unhappy, because if you're not unhappy, then what would be left? That's the main thing. We just don't want to be unhappy. You don't have to be happy. You have to be content. And, without having to amass so many things to entertain yourself and things like that. You can just, be content with the present moment or the basic requisites, necessities of life. And you can live a lot easier. The reason why people have to work 2 or 3 jobs is because they want the money to follow a lifestyle of excess and or indulge in whatever they want to do. But if a person wanted to, they can actually live fairly okay if their needs are not too much. But anyway, so so the right view is like the road map to the end of suffering. It's sort of like the world view, or the right understanding. And usually that's where people start. And there's 3 levels of right understanding. The first one is the intellectual level. Now, the way most of us who were born in this country heard about Dhamma was, like I already mentioned, you go into a lecture of some Lama or Zen monk or yogi, or you read some book, that you saw on somebody's coffee table. You picked it up, oh, what's that? And that's how I got started too. I took that course in world religions. After I took the TM thing, and at that time, a lot of hippies were going to India. And I was in the army in Europe for a while before going to Vietnam, and I met a lot of European hippies and even some Americans who had been coming back from India on the hippie trail, famous hippie trail. They were telling me of all the fun and games and neat things, to discover in India. So, I determined that's what I wanted to do. So I took a course in world religions before I left on that trip. And then that's when I heard about and, studied the world religions. And then we had to write a term paper on the religion that interested the most. So I chose Buddhism. I don't know why, I really hadn't heard anything about Buddhism before, but I had to go to the library, do some research. And at that time, there was only 6 books on Buddhism in a whole public library. Now there's 60,000, but those days. But anyway, so I, read up on that and wrote this paper. And I read things about, 4 Noble Truths and Eightfold Path and Nirvana and Karma. And it was all like, wow, this is all new. How come I never heard about this stuff before? When I wrote the paper, and I got an A+ on the first and last one I ever got in school. But then I kind of dropped it because there was no temples around, there was no Dhamma centers around, there was nothing around in those days in 1971, except maybe in New York or San Francisco, the odd Chinese or Japanese temple with an old monk in there burning incense or something. But I mean, I'm sorry if I was kind of generalizing too much, but so I just went back to fun and games, getting loaded and getting into mischief and stuff and planning my trip to India. So anyway, so I got an intellectual understanding, but I didn't go on thinking about it. So I got some understanding, but I didn't go on to really think about it or do anything about it. So that's one thing. So there's intellectual understanding, but that kind of, at least you hear about something. But the second level of wisdom is you have to think about it. You have to think about what you read or heard in order for it to kind of go a little deeper. And that's what I didn't have the chance to do. Or the second step of the Eightfold Path is right thought, which is the same thing, thinking about the Dhamma. I didn't go on to do that because there wasn't the opportunity. Only later when I got to India and took that meditation course that I mentioned already about, that's when we were developing these 3 levels of wisdom. So anyway, intellectual wisdom, that gets you started. And then you go on thinking about it, and that kind of increases your, and not only thinking, but it includes, meditating, contemplating, and observing how the law of karma is working out there in the world and yourself and in others, how people are, suffering because of the consequences of their actions, body, speech, and mind, and how overly dependent people are on sensual pleasures and all that, the strong habits that people have developed, and seeing how that is just, reflecting on that, it makes more sense. And especially when you're looking at it within your own mind and seeing what a mess your own mind is in terms of ego and all these habits and, desires and aversions and prejudices and all that. So developing that, the second step of the Eightfold Path, once you get the right view, you have to go on thinking about it. So developing right thought. Not going to go into all the details of it because a lot of you probably already know, but there's, 3 kinds of right thought: the thought of renunciation, the thought of non-ill will, and the thought of non-cruelty, because these are all connected with the Dhamma. So thinking about, how nice it would be if, we weren't so burdened with all these strong cravings and desires, and having to amass all these things that we collect and think we need, and we're buying all these things thinking we need all these things. We wind up using them once or twice and putting them in the attic to collect dust, and then we have to put bars on our windows because thieves are trying to come and steal our things, and we have to worry about them, protect them. It's a big burden. And so the idea of simplifying your life, not being so burdened with and dependent on having so many things that you can't really control, and so on. So that thought about simplifying the life, whether you're going to become a monastic or even as a layperson. So and then thinking about the Dhamma in general, reading more and learning more about the Dhamma. So this is a systematic process. You're laying a good foundation, and so once you got the right view, basically it's like a world view, which includes within the Dhamma, of course, the idea of samsara and about the rebirth, about how the mind just keeps getting recycled over and over and over again through the birth and death, as I already kind of mentioned before. Of course, a lot of people, they don't believe in rebirth, and that's okay, but because we're interested in gaining liberation in this life, not for the next life necessarily. So once you have the right view and the right thought, so that lays the foundation. Now what are you going to do? Okay, based on the right view, which means greed, hatred, and delusion causes you a lot of problems. What are you going to do? Right speech. So right view says if you tell lies, slander, use harsh speech, all kinds of other negative speeches, people are going to react to you. They're going to, punch you in the nose. They're going to come looking to take you out. That means pain and suffering will come to you. You lose your friends. People call you a liar. This and that. So you clean up your speech. So the practice of right speech. And the same with the right action. You see all the suffering that comes when we kill or even physically abuse others, or even just not having a regard for life, so just thinking it's okay to stomp on cockroaches and exterminate anything that you don't like, or beat people up to do you wrong or something, physical abuse. And then also sexual misconduct, harming people through aggressive craving through that outlet. And we know that causes so much suffering in the world, and it's such a strong addiction. And so, learn how to be more content, or, just follow monogamy, as they say, avoid the, but anyway, so being more content anyway. And then to avoid stealing. So anyway, those right actions, I think you all know what they are. Because again, all these things are connected with the law of karma, and they're going to bring back a lot of suffering. So you clean up your karma, so to speak. And then the livelihood, right livelihood. You change the way you're going to earn your living. If the way you earn your living causes you to have to tell lies, or at least be deceitful, or producing things that cause harm to others. So there's certain types of livelihoods that somebody following the Dhamma path probably shouldn't do if they can avoid it, because of the guilty conscience that you might have, or just knowing that you're harming others. But nowadays it's almost difficult to find a job that doesn't somehow cause deceit, subtle deceptions, or not telling the whole truth, like even in food production, even in medicine, right? And all these other things, there's so much stuff going on that take advantage of other people or just out of greed, overselling drugs, knowing they're bad for people, but they make a lot of money, so we give them anyway. And there's so many aspects of that. So, but you're the one that has to go and sleep at night. We'll wake up in the morning with to know that I haven't hurt a flea. What did I do today? I didn't hurt a flea. Didn't do anything that caused some suffering to others. Now, even like a secretary, something simple like that. So a secretary, right, just wanted to take the books for a big corporation. So, during the tax, doing the books, and the boss comes over and looks over their shoulder and say, "Oh, change that 50 million just to 5 million. What? That wouldn't be right. Well, 10 people are looking for your job. And so you feel pressured, to do something, like that because, wanting to maybe lose your job. So even so, that's the way, unfortunately, that's the way society has evolved to a great extent. So anyway, having a livelihood that wouldn't be connected with or having to put yourself in a position to compromise your sort of right view, let's say. So basically, the right speech, right action, and right livelihood, these are all connected with the law of karma, by living in harmony with the laws of nature. So it's about living in harmony with the laws of nature. And what is the law of nature, as I talked about on the first day or so? Law of karma, right? Gravity, Newton's law. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Whatever goes down is going to come back on you. So that's living in a harmony with the laws of nature. But so most people are living out of harmony with the laws of nature because they go around killing, lying, stealing, raping, pillaging, plundering, intoxicating their mind, in which they would then go out and do those other things. And that's why, following the precepts, which includes the right speech and the right actions to avoid these kind of heavy karmic results that have created all the suffering in the world. Because I've already mentioned, almost all the ills of the world, wars, crimes, everything else, is based on people not following the 5 precepts. And because they don't have control over their mind. They don't have control over their impulses. So they act out. And so that is where the practice, the last 3 steps of the Eightfold Path play the important part. In being the right effort, the effort to actually practice all of the above. And the right mindfulness, means practicing mindfulness, being careful about, what you're reacting to in the present moment, in developing, trying to live more in the present moment, but just being mindful of your thoughts, applying right effort to abandon the negative thoughts, cultivate the right thoughts, and so on. So basically the practice of meditation. And then, concentration. So mindfulness and concentration, basically they go hand in hand. And as I've mentioned, you gain the concentration through the mindfulness, and that's why mindfulness is listed, before right concentration. And all the different lists of mental qualities, mindfulness always comes before concentration, and that's because you get concentrated through the practice of mindfulness. It's not that you have to practice something separate from it. And it also means being concentrated on the path, not being distracted. Actually, that's the definition of concentration, not being distracted. And so not being distracted from the goal of trying to free your mind from suffering. Because there's so many lures and temptations that are continually trying to pull at us from every direction. So it takes a lot of effort and a lot of courage. And, probably some of you have experienced that. Even, you start practicing Dhamma and you want to change, but most of the world doesn't want to change. And anybody who tries to change, then they get kind of ostracized. So sometimes even from our own families, our own family will kind of disown us. I think we've gone bonkers, we're trying to practice meditation and other things like, what? Become a vegetarian? What, are you crazy? Want to give up alcohol? Give up all these things? They think you're nuts. So, like in my case, became a monk. Oh my God. You see, when I became a monk, at the same time, or just before that, I had been traveling through Afghanistan, or on the hippie trail from Europe to India, going through Afghanistan, and I was, pretty much, addicted to hashish and, drugs, not like heroin or anything, but just, and like a fool, I tried to smuggle some hashish out of Afghanistan and got busted and put in prison for 3 months. Actually, it wound up only being 1 month. And I had an Islamic trial. And I had to go to this courthouse in Kandahar. And there was a mullah, what you see on TV with a long white beard sitting on a Persian carpet, We were down below. But, we were guilty and we didn't try to, get out of it. So the sentence was $500 of life in prison. Or $500 fine until you pay it. So fortunately I had the money, I could get out. So anyway, my parents found out about that. I didn't have any money, I had to write home and ask my mother to send me $500 more so I could continue going to India. And she thought I'd completely gone stark raving mad, And I did some other foolish things, like tried to forge checks in the black market and got caught. And so my parents thought I really lost my mind, on drugs. And maybe I had a little bit. But then, 4 months later, after I took this meditation course in Nepal, and I write home and I tell them, I'm going to become a Buddhist monk. They go, oh my God. They didn't know what would be worse. They thought that might be worse than spending a life in prison or overdosing on drugs. Anyway, I just mentioned that just to show you the mindset, how people were, back in those days, even thinking of becoming a Buddhist monk was like absolutely crazy. So, there's a lot of, these cultural pressures against people, wanting to follow their path. But it takes a lot of courage to do that. And that is part of the higher evolution. If you want to break out of the group mind, the group conditioning, then you have to become a free thinker. You have to become a true individual. Now, some people say, well, you're not a free thinker, you're following the Buddhist teaching. Okay, we might be following the Dhamma teachings, but through our own experience, we see that they are working. And we still can think for ourselves. Because now we're actually in control of our thoughts, through practicing mindfulness. You can think what you want to think, and you don't have to think what you don't want to think. But most people go on thinking what they don't want to think anyway because they don't know how to get out of it. They don't know how to manage their thoughts. So anyway, this is the basically the steps, the Eightfold Path, and it's following these systematic steps because each one is a springboard for the next. Right view is a springboard for generating right thought. And right thought is because all of our speech and actions come initially from thoughts. There's a thought in your mind and then you speak. So if your thoughts are wrong, your speech will be wrong. If your view is wrong, your thoughts will be wrong. If the thoughts are wrong, the speech will be wrong. If speech is wrong, your actions will be wrong. If the actions are wrong, your livelihood will be wrong. And your mindfulness will be wrong. And your effort will be wrong. And your concentration will be wrong. And so that's why, the right view is considered to be the first step of that. And again, it has the 3 levels of right view: the intellectual right view, then the understanding that comes through contemplating and initially meditating, and then finally these stages of insight that I talked about last night, where you're entering the stream and destroying the root of the 10 fetters and so on, and leading to freeing the mind. So that's basically what I wanted to share with you in this Dhamma talk, and to encourage you in the practice, but knowing that it's a long road, and the practice is really individual. And everybody is going to take the Dhamma and practice it according to their sort of karmic limitations. But that's just the way it is. But by practicing that path of regular steps, and faith is one of the spiritual faculties. Is that having faith, and the faith means that taking the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, or at least taking refuge in a spiritual path, and then following that. And the faith has 3 levels too, or confidence. The initial or excited faith that is connected with the first level of understanding, the intellectual understanding. So you read something about the Dhamma and you get kind of excited, and so it's excited faith to do something new, right? Think, yeah, I'm gonna do that. And but then, after you start doing it, you realize that, oh, maybe I won't attain enlightenment in 6 months. Might be a little longer than that. So then that excited faith then kind of mellows out into what is called enduring faith. That means you realize, well, it may not be so quick as you thought, because now you've encountered Mara deep within the mind. And but the faith is still there, that if you work at it in a steady way, that progress can be made little by little. And so that faith endures, through the ups and downs of your life and so on, until finally you reach that level of entering the stream where that faith then becomes unshakable, and overcoming the doubts that we talked about last night. Okay, so I think we'll finish there. If you have any questions about any of that, then again you can write them down for the Q&A session tonight. Okay, so again, just close the eyes and start bringing the attention, cut off that outward view. Just try to feel the outline of the body really that's one of the most powerful things, to be able to just at any time, just within a second or two, just having your attention on that outline of the body, and it brings all the Dhamma back into view. Take a deep, slow breath. Take a deep, slow breath, hold the air in your lungs for as long as you comfortably can. Follow that contracting out breath all the way down to the in, where the last bit of air goes out. And then keep your attention at that spot, that contraction of the lungs without air. Just wait there, relax, till the next breath comes in automatically. The body has intelligent wisdom. It knows when it needs air. It'll come back in. Feel that next expanding in breath. Feel that sitting body, present moment. Okay, so now you can mindfully stand up to relieve any discomfort in your legs, or do a standing awareness, do the walking. three-part breathing. Especially work on with the three-part breathing, following the contracting out breath all the way down to the end. Feel that last little, give an extra little contraction at the end, get all the old air out of the lung, and just stay at that point without breath for a few seconds until the next breath comes in. Feel that present moment. Those pauses after the breath is out, it's almost impossible to think about anything. You just feel that vibration of the present moment. Okay, now do a little session of walking around the room as we've done before. Move the cushions a little bit. Go ahead and begin. Coordinate the steps with the breathing. In breath, lifting, swinging forward. Out breath, pressing, shifting forward. Pausing at each corner to make a mindful right angle turn. Even while doing the walking, you can try to so feel the outline of the body. You can just watch the walking body, even though you're carefully moving the feet. You can also have that vague outline of the rest of the body there. Just walking, walking. Feeling other sensations on the body as well. Expanded awareness. Now, mindfully come back to your seats. Resume the sitting awareness.